Well, let us begin with the paradox that unsettles our kindness. The more I try to help, the more I may be handling your life in my thought. The very impulse that feels tender can be the very hand that intrudes. When I sit down to do something for you, what am I doing? Am I not attempting to take charge of your atmosphere, to push my idea of good into your experience? And who authorized me to enter your consciousness? When I say I will send energy, where do I imagine you are over there? A target for my willing? No, no. Love doesn't push. Love beholds. Love does not enter the field of another's being with ropes and cables of thought. Love stands still and knows God. There are two movements we call compassion. One bows, one pushes. One says, Father, thou art the life of this one. I will behold thy handiwork. The other says, I know what should happen here. Let me project it. One reveres the government of God. The other attempts to add an extra force to God's own completeness. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. If I seek to move you by my might, by my concentration, by my emotional pressure, I have already stepped out of the law. I have made of my mind a second power. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. It is a cosmic law, not a slogan. When I install my will as a little god in your story, I have violated the commandment that upholds harmony. Let me be plain. I never send energy to people, no matter how noble the motive sounds. I do not send rays, thoughts, blessings as a personal force. I have studiously avoided mental and physical contacts. Why? Because love does not manipulate. Because spiritual law is impersonal, and when you try to use it, it uses you. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. If you sow interference, you will reap interference. If you sow control, you will be controlled. Do not ever tamper with the cosmic law, because it is a double-edged sword. You violate it with the sugar of good intention, and still it makes its cut, for there can be no selfish purpose in a divine principle. You are not a distant object for my thought to strike. You are a spiritual being, forever in God. Even to think of you as a target dignifies illusion. In him we live and move and have our being. Where shall I send him to reach him? Where shall I dispatch energy to find the one who is already all? If I imagine you outside, imagine you outside of the all, I have already lost the thread. I have placed you and me in two powers, two places, two minds. No, my conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. I am not the actor. God is the actor. I am the witness. I am the instrument, never the intervener. Love thy neighbor as thyself. How? By honoring the same law for my neighbor that I honor for myself. One God, one life, one mind. Love will not break into a neighbor's house, even with a bouquet in its hand. Love will not trespass consciousness, even with a prayer that shouts. Love is meek, love is mild, and yet love is the might of God when I stand out of the way. Be still and know that I am God. Not be busy and make God. Be still and know God. The stillness is not neglect, it is reverence. The knowing is not opinion, it is recognition. I give you then a promise and a protection. There is a way to bless without control, to help without handling. It begins not with sending, but with acknowledging God's allness here and there and everywhere, and ceasing to argue with what appears. It unfolds not in projection, but in silence, the sacred silence in which the click of assurance may come, the wordless sense. I am. That is the way, that is the law. Before any words, before any movement, a yielding, Father, into thy hands. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. In that surrender there is no interference, and in that non-interference there is the purest love. Well then, a question that must be asked plainly. When I say I, where do you place it? In the head? In the heart? In the outline of a body? If I touch the forehead, have I touched the eye? If I put my hand upon the chest, have I found the seat of identity? No, no. The surgeon may open a skull and name tissues and currents, but no surgeon has ever yet found any me inside of a body, absent from the body, present with the Lord. If I am present with the Lord, where? Tell me. Shall I be localized for the convenience of any human thought? Am I here or there? Am I this inch of space or that? Where am I? Let us push the question further, not to confuse, but to liberate. When you sleep and the body lies unmoving, do you cease to be? When you dream and range the wide world in a moment, what geography was that? The body stays in the bed. The I is not in the bed. Your spiritual you isn't confined to the material body. You can't leave it because you aren't in it and you never have been in it. In Him we live and move and have our being. If being is in Him, then to look for you as a point in space is to already step out of truth into picture thinking. If I imagine you as a distant object, a knob I can turn, a light I can brighten with my beam, I have made of you a thing and of God a locality. No, no. God is not a locality. Spirit is not a point to be struck. Behind all sending is this hidden premise that you are over there and deficient, and that my force dispatched from here can reach, impact, and repair you. It sounds kind, and it is an error. It posits two powers and two lives, your separate stream and my stream of projected strength. It assumes that spiritual identity can be moved by human will, that the law of God can be added to or assisted. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, not even a god named my benevolent magnetism. The true I, your I, my I, is hid with Christ in God. I and my Father are one. Oneness is not distance closed by effort. It is completeness realized by surrender. If you are already in God, what can my pressure add? If I am already in God, what is there to send? Nothing. Nothing but recognition. Consider how crude the picture becomes when we say, I will aim a thought at you. Which you? The outline you see in the mirror? The bundle of memories from last week? The pulse rate? If I cannot find you in a bone or a nerve, how shall I address a mental package to you as if you were a mailbox? Neither shall they say, lo here or lo there. For behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Within, not within matter, but within the withinness of spirit, the unbounded life that is God's own being expressing as you. There is no handle to pull on that. There is no lever, no wand, no mental cable long enough to lasso the infinite. Attempt it, and you have lowered truth to mechanics and made yourself a mechanic of the soul. Do not do it. Then what? If I cannot truly localize you, my work cannot be to target you. If the I of you is spiritual and forever held in God, my relation to you cannot be influence. It must be witness. It cannot be impact. It must be recognition. I am not appointed to move you. I am called to know God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still, not aim. No, not press. In that knowing, something wordless occurs. Not outgoing force, but incoming assurance. The quiet fact that God is already being Himself where you appear to be. The correction is simple and radical. Cease taking you as an object and begin beholding you as the presence of God's life. When I accept this, a strange mercy dawns. The burden falls off of my shoulders, the burden of distance, of urgency, of responsibility to manipulate an outcome. I lay down the imagined bow and arrow of psychic doing And I turn to God the way a flower turns to light, not to send, but to receive, not to command, but to yield. God is the actor. I am the instrument. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Therefore, I need not reach you, I need only realize Him. And in that realization, without trespass and without push, blessing is already at hand. Let us speak now of law impersonal, unwavering, not subject to the persuasion of a frightened heart. There is a cosmic law that undergirds all true work. Spirit is not a possession, power is not a private instrument, and God is not a wand in a human hand. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, not even a God named my well-intentioned will. Spiritual law is not a weapon, not a wand, not a tool. When I try to use it, it uses me. Do not ever tamper with the cosmic law, for it is a double-edged sword. It blesses in obedience and cuts in presumption, not out of wrath, but out of principle. You know this already in simpler realms. If you defy 2 times 2 is 4 and write 5, your ledger will not hate you, it will simply not balance, and the auditor will find you out. If an engineer grows sentimental and decides a beam can carry what it cannot, the bridge does not punish. It fails, and those upon it suffer. If you run a red light with love in your heart, the oncoming car does not make inquiry into your motive. Principle is impersonal. It does not bend. It bends you back into consequence. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. To sow is to align or violate. To reap is to meet the exact harvest of the seed, no more and no less. Now here is the tender self-deception that must be named. I mean well. Of course you do. So do I. Yet I mean well can be a veil over fear. I cannot bear their pain, I must fix it. Superiority, I know what outcome should be. Or control, I cannot trust the invisible governance of God here. This is idolatry disguised as benevolence. It sets up a second power, my magnetism, my concentration, my plan, alongside the one, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. The more refined the motive, the more subtle the temptation. But law is unseduced by sweetness. It asks only, are you using me for a private purpose, or are you yielded to the one who alone acts? Therefore I draw the line gently, but I draw it firmly. Do not tamper with another's consciousness. Do not intrude upon another's choices, timing, or path. You do not know the curriculum of their soul. You do not know what hour the seed breaks ground, what winter must complete its work before spring appears. When you enter as an intervener, you take to yourself a role not given you. You trespass the temple that is God's within them. Remember, who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Our neighbor stands or falls unto God, not unto our anxious thought. What then of consequence? It is precise. If you sow mental interference, you reap entanglement. If you set your thought to manage, thought will turn and manage you. With the measure you meet of pressure, of silent argument, of covert influence, it shall be measured to you again. You become the very object of suggestion you had sent forth. Your peace thins, your sleep grows restless, your own choices feel crowded by the very atmosphere you cultivated. This is not punishment. This is mathematics. This is engineering. This is the traffic law of spirit revealing itself. One God, one mind, one life, and no private annex to be rented for personal projects. Then a question rises, sober and saving. If I cannot use spiritual law, what is the rightful function of prayer? Hear it. Prayer is not the lever by which I move events. Prayer is the surrender by which events are released to God. Prayer does not push, it yields. Prayer does not argue, it recognizes. Prayer does not add power to a situation, it acknowledges that power is already omnipresent. Be still and know that I am God. Be still, still your will, still your urgency, still your designs, and know the one, know the allness, know the sufficiency. Thy will be done is not a pious sentence. It is the lawful posture by which the double-edged sword becomes pure light and no blade at all to us. I have studiously avoided mental and physical contacts for this reason. God is the actor and the doer and the beer. I am merely the instrument. When I accept that, I do not touch your will, I do not enter your timings, I do not set an outcome, I retire from using and rest in being used by God if God have any use for me in that instant. And if not, I rest still. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. From here our work becomes simple and safe, for prayer takes its rightful seat as recognition and release. And in that lawfulness, help, real help, may appear without a trespass, without a push, without a second power. What then am I in this holy transaction? I ask it of myself before I dare speak it to you. Am I the healer? Am I the mover? Am I the arranger of outcomes? No. No. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. I am not the doer. I am the place of consent. I am not the force. I am the yielded branch. I am merely the instrument. God is the actor and the doer and the beer. When I remember, that blessing ceases to be something I direct across a distance. It becomes the state in which I stand aside and let God be God where you and I appear. Do not mistake this for indifference. Refusing to send is not apathy. It is obedience. It is the surrender of a private will that would make of itself a second power. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Not the God of my urgency, not the God of my clairvoyance, not even the God of my tender plan. To enthrone a second power is to violate the commandment that God's harmony. To release that will is to love. Love thy neighbor as thyself. How do I love as myself? By giving my neighbor the same sacred freedom I plead for in my own soul, freedom from being handled, nudged, or steered by human thought. I will not cross the threshold of your inner temple with even a fragrant intrusion. I will stand in the outer court and bow to the one who alone abides within. Then what is lawful compassion? It is not to push a preferred picture, it is to behold presence. It is to look where human sense reports lack, disease, conflict, or fear, and refuse the verdict of appearances. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is not a human verdict. It is the recognition of God's allness here. It does not argue with symptoms. It beholds the life that is never sick. It does not wrestle a mind. It acknowledges the mind that is never confused. It does not brace against danger. It recognizes the presence that never leaves nor forsakes. In that beholding, there is no interference, because there is no second actor in store. There is only the one acting as the law of its own being. I can testify that when I have retired from intervention and taken my seat as witness, something quiet and faithful occurs, not a surge leaving me, but a peace arriving as me. It wants to say and speak and do, but without words, without pressure. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. And in that oneness, no mental cable is thrown, no current is pushed. There is only divine selfhood recognizing itself. Sometimes nothing outward changes at once, and yet the atmosphere clears. Sometimes the phone rings and we hear, it has lifted. I cannot claim it. I dare not. I keep to the truth. God is the actor. I am the instrument. So here the turn we are making. I do not act upon another. I yield to God's action, and that yielding is the blessing. This is not passivity. It is the highest activity of the soul, consent to the infinite. It preserves the law, one God, no other, and it fulfills the commandment of love by refusing trespass. And it prepares the way for practice, not theory. For what do I do when a need presents itself? I do not plan and I do not project. First, I recognize. First, I acknowledge the allness of God right where the shadow seems to speak. Then I grow still. Be still and know that I am God. In that stillness, we shall wait desireless, attentive until assurance dawns. We will go there together. Recognition, and then the holy silence. And in that silence, without push and without second power, we shall discover that thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. When a need presents itself, my first motion is not outward, not toward your name, not toward a diagnosis or a storyline. My first motion is inward. I close the door of sense and say within, Father, thou art the only presence, the only power, the only life here. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, one, not two forces contending, not God and a problem, not spirit and a shadow. In that acknowledgement, I refuse to begin with you as a problem. I begin with God as all. I am not in the physical. I am absent from the body, present with the Lord. And in that presence, I do not go out to treat a condition. I stand still to know God. Be still and know that I am God. Then the quiet work begins. I withdraw the pictures, every report, every scan, every memory that paints a contour of trouble. I do not argue with them. I release them. I will not argue with what appears, for arguing grants it a secondary life. I turn instead to recognition. God is, therefore harmony is. God is infinite, therefore there is no opposite power. God is life, therefore the life that is God is the only life present. God is mind, therefore intelligence is here, unconfused, unfragmented. God is love, therefore fear has no law to stand upon. I do not outline how harmony must appear. I refuse to rehearse outcomes. Recognition is enough. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment recognizes what is true in God, not what clamors in sense. You may ask, but what of this person? What of their pain? What of the timing? Hear me. In this phase, there is no person in my thought to manage. There is only God to know. Any attempt to use God to improve a picture is already two powers in disguise. No, we are not improving shadows. We are acknowledging light. I and my Father are one. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Therefore, in realizing God here, I am not excluding anyone. I am including all in the one. This is not a neglect of you. This is the only lawful way to behold you. I watch my motive as a sentry at a gate. Am I wanting a result? Am I pressing for a date on the calendar of good? If so, I quietly repent of that second God. Not my will, but thine be done. Desirelessness is the safety of this work. I lay down the timetable, the picture, even the benevolent plan. I want nothing from you and nothing for you, because I trust the all in all to be itself. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. To want nothing is not coldness. It is love without interference. It is the recognition that God is adequate to God's own universe without my outline. And so I whisper, not as a mantra to coerce, but as a confession of law. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Now I examine the last residues of argument. Have I been silently saying, yes, but the report, yes, but the history, yes, but the odds? Each but is an idol, a little altar to a second power. Gently, not violently, I let them go. God is. Therefore, harmony is. God is. Therefore, wholeness is. God is. Therefore, completeness is. I do not add a design to it. I do not attach a picture of how it must look in time and space. I accept that whatever God is being here now as the fact beneath appearance. In this recognition, I feel myself loosen from the effort to think. Thought grows simple, then thin, then quiet. I am not trying to move a condition. I am yielding to immovable reality. The mind that catalogued symptoms has no more business here. The heart that hurried outcomes gives up its calendar. There is only the one mind, one life, one love, one law. Having recognized, I do not press the point, I rest the point. I do not proceed to words about God. I allow God to be God without my commentary. This is the holy edge where method gives way to presence, where recognition ripens into silence. In that quiet, without push and without plan, the click may come, the wordless assurance, I am. And so, having recognized, we now enter that silence where God alone acts. Now we rest not to make something happen, but to allow what is always happening in God to be felt. Take a chair that is comfortable. There is no occult reason for any posture, only one of physical ease. Let the back be supported, the feet at rest on the floor. Never hold the arms rigid. Never lock the hands in effort. Keep the hands and arms relaxed, as if the whole body were quietly dismissed from attention. In this position, with the eyes closed, I am virtually unaware of having a body. I am not in the physical, absent from the body, present with the Lord. No ritual, no props, no strain, comfort only, that the senses may cease calling for notice. Now let the eyelids fall as a gentle curtain. Do not aim the thought anywhere, not toward a person, not toward a condition, not even toward a hoped-for light. No reaching with thought, no mental pushing. If a phrase should arise at the threshold, let it be simple and surrendering, not persuasive. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Speak it once, perhaps twice, and then cease. Be still and know that I am God. Be still, no inner argument, no recitation of promises, no schedule of results, no analysis, no reasoning, only recognition. And if the mind wishes to perform, to rehearse, to fix, let it be met with a quiet, no, not that, not now, not a bit. This silence is not blankness. It is not vacancy. It is receptivity without desire, attention without direction. Not my will, but thine be done. We are not waiting for a sign to approve a plan. We are emptying the plan. We are not trying to hold the mind like a clenched fist. We are opening the hand. Waiting, yes, but not on time. Waiting, yes, but not for outcome. We wait upon the Lord. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Desirelessness is the safety here, because desire tries to steer the infinite and silence yields to it. There may be noise on the surface, the motes of yesterday's conversation, the rumor of the body's chair, the restless animal of habit. Do not fight it. Fighting feeds it. Simply withdraw interest, as you might let a child tire of a toy by offering no attention. Soon the sense world recedes to the edge, like a tide going out. It is not your doing. It is the gravity of spirit drawing awareness to its own center. Then, sometimes quickly, sometimes after a while, there comes what I have called the click. Not fireworks, not a trance, a settling, a softness, as if a tension you had not admitted you were carrying drops off your shoulders without a sound, or a lift light without brightness, an ease that needs no proof. At times it is a wordless sentence rising of its own accord. It is I, be not afraid. At times it is only a hush, an inner Sabbath. I and my Father are one. You know it by its nature. It requires nothing of you. It argues nothing. It commands nothing. It simply is, and you are in it. The peace of God that passeth understanding. This is the point of work. The true work is not my concentrated thought. It is my receptivity until God's assurance is felt. Do not try to lengthen it when it comes. Do not lament when it seems delayed. Both grasping and regretting are forms of will. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Let the click be what it is. Consent, rest. Let the Father that dwelleth in me do the works. The doing, if there be any, is God's. Your part is wholly non-doing. Now, if a person's name floats up, if a situation rises like a picture at the edges of this silence, do not seize it. Do not reach out. Do not form a beam or a cord or a stream. Hold nothing and no one by the handle of thought. Return gently to the one. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Therefore, all are already included. No cables, no currents, no pushing, no private contact. In this assurance, you behold without entering, you love without handling. From this interior Sabbath, we shall learn to hold another in God without the trespass of mental contact. But first, remain a moment longer at the altar of silence. Let the law keep you. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. One presence, one power, one life. And in that one, you, I, and all creation are found safe, untouchable by interference, perfectly available to grace. Here is the way I hold you, without trespass. First, I refuse the impulse to enter you. I do not penetrate your mind. I do not read it, steer it, or attempt to reach it. No, no, I have no business in your private sanctuary. Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Your master is God, mine also. My work is not to manage your choices or accelerate your timetable. My work is to behold, to see you as you are in God, not as a personal problem to be managed. I retire from influence and take my stand as witness. What is beholding? It is not a glassy-eyed denial of what human sense reports, nor is it a prettified wishing. It is righteous judgment. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is the spiritual fact in place of the sensory report. It looks where pain cries out and recognizes life unbroken. It looks where confusion confesses itself and knows, mind undivided. It looks where fear forecasts its storms and acknowledges love already governing. In beholding, I do not say, be well, or do this, or choose that. No inner advice, no silent coaching, no nudging of events like pieces on a board. That is mental contact, and it is a trespass. I am not a private counselor in the back of your consciousness. I am the place where God is recognized as all. Practically, it is like this. If your name arises at the margin of prayer, I do not seize it. I let it rest in God. I turn again simply and sincerely to the one, Father, reveal thyself. Not reveal a plan, Not reveal a technique, reveal thyself. Let thy will be done. I rest in thy government. And then I become quiet, very quiet, without aim. If a picture tries to form of you taking a step, of an outcome I favor, of a conversation unfolding as I prefer, I gently refuse the picture. No outlining, no directing relationships, no controlling decisions. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. An outline is a second God. A timetable is a second God. Even a benevolent vision becomes a second power if it replaces simple recognition of the one. You may ask, but if I do not send energy, if I do not give guidance inside, am I not doing nothing? Hear the answer that sets you free. Be still and know that I am God. Be still is not nothing, it is obedience. No is not nothing, it is the substance. To refrain from interference is not a void, it is the altar where the fire falls without human match. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Might is the push of thought. Power is the lever of personality. Spirit is God acting as himself, universally present, universally sufficient, when I am still and know I have done the only lawful something there is to do. So I keep to inner language that opens space instead of filling it. Father, reveal thyself. Let thy will be done. I rest in thy government. Sometimes it is only thy grace is my sufficiency in all things, and then silence. I do not add petitions about you. I do not bargain for conditions. I do not discreetly slip in my preference under the cloak of prayer. No, no. Love does not push. Love yields. Love releases. Love beholds God in and as the one before me and leaves them free in God. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from my influence, liberty from my fear, liberty for God to be God. There is a safety in this that you can prove. When I behold you in God, I do not feel entangled afterward because I have not thrown a line. I do not grow anxious to check results because I never set an outcome. I do not rehearse our next conversation in the secret theater of thought because I am not the playwright of your life. I have studiously avoided mental and physical contacts, and in that abstinence I have found a cleaner channel. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea, without a push, without a beam, without a secret voice in your ear. And what if nothing seems to happen? Then I keep covenant with the law. I bless God by trusting God. I let appearances be what they will in time, while I rest in what is in truth. He that believeth shall not make haste, no pressure, only the quiet insistence that one presence is the presence here. If at any moment the click arrives, the hush, the assurance, I bow and keep still. If it does not, I bow and keep still. In both, I refuse trespass. I refuse a second power. I refuse to handle you. I behold you as hid with Christ in God, and I leave the Holy of Holies to the high priest who is God himself. In that leaving, blessing is not delayed, it is purified. And in that purity, you and I are safe from each other's good intentions, safe for grace. Now comes a very human tremor in the heart. If I do not do something, am I not failing love? We have been trained to equate love with constant activity, with messages and plans and invisible pushes. We distrust stillness. We even feel guilty if our hands are empty and our thought is not reaching for the person in need. We say, surely I must send something light, strength, courage, else I am abandoning them. This is the pressure of a second God in disguise. It is not love. It is fear wearing the garments of help. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, not the God of my restless doing, not the God of my anxious presence that must be felt. Hear this and be free. Silence is not passivity. Silence is obedience. When I withdraw my private will and all its benevolent projects, I am not doing nothing. I am honoring the first commandment in the only way that counts, by enthroning one presence, one power, one law. Be still and know that I am God. Be still, not because activity is evil, but because unauthorized activity is interference, and interference is idolatry. Be still, not to abandon your neighbor, but to leave them safe from your outline and safe for God. Love does not push. Love yields, love releases, and yielding is not apathy, it is fidelity to the one actor. I can tell you how it feels when this obedience takes hold. The breath softens without your notice. The forehead unknits. The mind that had been busy composing inner letters drops its pen. The need to fix loses its grip. It is as if a hand unclenches inside the chest. A quiet arrives unannounced, undesigned, that does not depend on a report changing. The peace of God, which passeth all understanding, brushes the edge of awareness, and you recognize it not by fireworks, but by the absence of pressure. I and my Father are one. In that oneness, the impulse to help by push simply cannot gain a foothold. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Therefore, standing in God, I am closer to you than any beam of thought could travel, and yet I do not touch you. I do not press you. I do not trespass. Here we must distinguish compassion from pity. Pity joins the picture, the senses paint. Pity says, yes, you are as the report says, and I weep with that verdict. Compassion refuses the verdict while never refusing the one before it. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment does not harden the heart. It clears the eye. It stands beside the one who suffers without entering the dream to push its furniture around. It will serve with hands when service is needed. Feed, clothe, tend, but inwardly it keeps the altar clean. One presence, here and now. Pity multiplies the illusion. Compassion recognizes the spiritual fact and is therefore free to act or to wait without fear. Yes, the guilt voice will argue, if you do not send, you do not care. No, no, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. Might is the push of mind. Power is the leverage of personality. Spirit is God being God. He that believeth shall not make haste. To refuse interference when the soul cries for speed is the deepest act of trust I know. It is to say, thy will be done, not as resignation, but as law. It is to confess, thy grace is my sufficiency in all things, not as a charm to get a result, but as truth that frees me from meddling. Now, get very practical, because this is where the test comes. You hear your child is sitting for an exam, and you feel the old reflex. Send concentration. Stop. Recognize the one mind. God is the only intelligence, the only capacity, the only remembrance. Hold no picture of outcomes, no silent hinting. Be still. Your friend enters surgery, and the heart in you strains to project strength. Stop. Recognize one. Life indivisible, unpierced by a blade, untouched by time. Consent to the silence until the click comes or not, and then go about your day without threads. Your partner goes into a difficult meeting, and you reach to script their words from within. Stop. Acknowledge one presence governing all, without sides, without winners and losers in God. No outlining, no coaching, rest. We will look more closely at these everyday moments because they visit us all. For now, Let the fear that silence is nothing melt in the light of this. The deepest help is often the refusal to interfere and the willingness to let God be God. In that willingness, there is no abandonment, only faithfulness, no vacancy, only presence, no guilt, only the quiet lawfulness that keeps us and those we love safe in the one. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things, and I rest. Let us look closely now, because these are the doorways where the old reflex tries to re-enter. First, illness. The report arrives, the image forms, the heart wants to push vitality across a distance, to imagine strong cells, to beam healing light. Stop, no pushing, no beams. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment begins not with the patient, not with the scan, not with the diagnosis. It begins with God. God is life. Therefore, the life that is God is the only life present. I am the resurrection and the life. I do not project health. I recognize life. I do not command tissue. I acknowledge presence. I withdraw pictures, names, times. I refuse to argue with symptoms, for argument grants them reality in a second power. Quietly, without drama, I return to the one Father. Thou art the only life here, indivisible, incorruptible, unpierced by blade, untouched by time. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Therefore, there is no need to send. Inclusion is already accomplished in the one. Now the pivot, from my will to God's government. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. I do not try to do, I yield. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Might is the push of mind. Power is the leverage of personality. Spirit is God being God. Having recognized, I enter silence. No petitions, no visualizations. Just be still and know that I am God. If the click comes a hush, a certitude I bow. If it does not, I bow. Then I go about my day without cords, without checking the line I did not throw. He that believeth shall not make haste. Second, conflict relationship. The tongue wants to argue in secret. The mind rehearses speeches, defends, indicts, edits the other's response. We even reach to soften their heart with a gentle inner pressure. No, no. That is interference. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from my inner counsel. I refuse the courtroom in imagination. I refuse sides. God is love, not sentiment governing principle. One presence, one influence, one mind. I acknowledge love as the only law operative where tension seems to be. I will not nudge anyone's choice. I will not compose a better conversation inside their consciousness. I recognize love as already ordaining whatever peace is true in God, whether or not it looks like my plan. Then the pivot, not my will, but thine be done. I enter the silence, desireless, agenda-free, until the heart softens into that unarguable quiet. If some outer kindness is given me to do, I do it, apology, listening, a meal, but without the secret pulley of outcome. Love does not push, love yields. Third, financial fear. The calendar shouts, the figures glare. The reflex is to send a stream toward opportunity, to visualize checks, to silently pressure a client, to outline supply. Stop. Your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Supply is not in people. Supply is God as sufficiency. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. I do not outline channels. I recognize source. I say within, not as magic, but as law, thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. I let give us this day our daily bread be a present tense fact, not a plea to a distant ear. Then the pivot. From my hustle to God's government, I enter silence. No bargaining, no deadlines laid at the altar. Only, Father, reveal thyself. Out of that quiet, sometimes an unforced idea arises. Finish this task, make this call, release that project, and it comes without the heat of fear. Act then, but as instrument, not as intervener. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. In every situation, the substitute is the same. Recognition of God's allness, then silent surrender. Recognition cleans the lens. Surrender removes the hand. And what is the fruit? You find that anxiety loses its hooks because there is nothing for it to catch. You have not thrown a line. You discover a peace that does not wait for evidence. You speak less and mean more. You move when moved and are still without guilt when stillness is your obedience. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Therefore, without mental contact, you feel a deeper companionship with all. Integrity gathers. The channel clears. As you sow, so shall ye reap. You have sown non-interference, and you reap liberty. Liberty from the pressure to manage a universe, and liberty for God to be God where you and I appear. And under that liberty, a quiet confidence grows, not in method, not in outcome, but in the one whose grace is, this moment, sufficiency in all things. What then is the harvest when we stop pushing? First, fear loses its occupation. Fear feeds on management. It fattens on outcomes. It keeps an account book of contingencies and calls it love. Remove the work of using power upon another, and fear has nothing left to hold. The hand unclenches. The breath remembers itself. Compassion, no longer mixed with panic, becomes pure. It is not pity that joins the picture. It is compassion that beholds God. The peace of God, which passeth all understanding, proves itself not by removing a storm, but by removing the inner weather vane that keeps checking the wind. In this peace, I do not become indifferent. I become clean. I can serve with hands without projecting with mind. I can listen without editing another's soul. I can stand still without the guilt that whispers, do something. Next, ethics becomes simple. I no longer accept responsibility for what belongs to God. I take full responsibility for my consciousness. Outcomes are God's. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. My part is lawfulness within. No second powers, no outlining, no beams, no chords, no private counsel disguised as prayer. I do not promise results, I promise obedience. I do not sign my name to a timeline. I sign my heart to the first commandment. In this, integrity gathers. There is no covert agenda, no hidden lever, no inner theater where I rearrange your choices. As ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. I would not have you reach into my consciousness with even the kindest hand. Therefore, I will not reach into yours. The golden rule is not a sentiment. It is spiritual hygiene. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from one another's will, liberty for God. As this alignment holds, the channel clears. I have studiously avoided mental and physical contacts because every thread I throw tangles me to results. Every thread I do not throw leaves me free to witness the presence that heals. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Therefore, without contact, I am not distant. I am present at the root. Without push, I am not idle. I am usable. Without control, I am not helpless. I am transparent. And through transparency, the light passes without my coloring, without my hurry, without my fear. He that believeth shall not make haste. Now let this integration sound in you as a simple litany, no decoration, only truth. In my oneness with God, I find completeness. I do not need to borrow from you or manage you. In my oneness with God, I find security. I do not need to arrange outcomes to feel safe. In my oneness with God, I find peace. I do not need to still your mind to quiet mine. In my oneness with God, I find joy. I do not need your agreement to be whole. In my oneness with God, I find sufficiency. I do not need channels to behave. I rest in source. I and my Father are one. Not two, one. Let me leave you with a practice plain enough to keep and deep enough to keep you. Twice a day on waking and before sleep, take 3 to 5 minutes. Sit comfortably. No ritual, only ease. Close the eyes. Dismiss the body from attention. Speak once, quietly, as confession, not petition. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Then be still. No projects, no persons, no pictures. Wait in receptivity until a softness, a hush, perhaps the click, arises or not. Consent either way. If a name appears, let it rest in God and return to the one. End with a simple acknowledgement. Be still and know that I am God. Carry this through your day as your golden rule in prayer. I will not do to another's soul what I would not have done to mine. Love does not push. Love yields. And in that yielding, you will find yourself a clearer witness to the presence that truly heals. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Take this now as a simple daily password you can remember in the night and in the morning. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Whisper it once as truth, not as magic. Twice if the heart is still made of stone. A third time if the old reflex tries to reach out and push. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Repeat until a small softening comes, a loosening where the will had a fist. Let it open the door that cannot be forced. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. The knock is not noise, it is trust. Then follow this plain sequence, unadorned and complete. Recognition. God is one presence, one power, one life. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. I pause there until the truth, not the words, begins to sound. Release. Not my will, but thine be done. I lay down the outline, the timeline, the private lever. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Receptivity. Be still and know that I am God. No pictures, no people, no project. Silence, not a blankness, but a yielded room where spirit is free to be spirit. Gratitude. Thank you. Not for a thing obtained, but for God being God. In everything give thanks. Recognition, release, receptivity, gratitude. A circle so simple the child in us can remember it at any hour. Make now the ethical vow that keeps the altar clean. I will not send. I will not push. I will not manipulate. Never. No, not for good causes, not for tender reasons, not for emergencies that flatter the ego. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. I will not enter another sanctuary uninvited. I will not place my hope in beams, cords, outlines, or secret advice. As ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. I would not be handled, therefore I will not handle. Love does not push. Love yields. Love beholds God and leaves the rest to God. I invite you gently, without compulsion, to try this for 1 week in one relationship. Choose the person toward whom your thought most easily reaches out to help by pressure: a child you fear for, a partner you wish to correct, a friend you long to steady. Each time the impulse rises to send, stop. Speak the password, "Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things." Step through the 4 doors: recognition, release, receptivity, gratitude. Keep your hands ready for practical kindness, but keep your mind clean of interference. Do not watch them for results. Watch your own heart. What changes in you? Perhaps a quiet that no argument can steal. Perhaps the end of anxious rehearsal. Perhaps a tenderness free of fear. As you sow, so shall ye reap. Sow non-interference and reap liberty. Now let us close, not with effort, but with a benediction that confesses truth. Father, thou art the only presence here. Thou art the life of my life, the mind of my mind, the love that loves itself in all. I yield the claim to act, to fix, to send. I lay down both wand and weapon, not by might, nor by power, but by thy Spirit. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. I am merely the instrument. God is the actor. I and my Father are one. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. I will not send. I will not push. I will not manipulate. Never. I will behold God, and I will be still. The peace of God, which passeth all understanding, keep your hearts and minds. And now, as we part, let the work be God's, and the rest be silent. God is the actor, I am the instrument, and so it is.